I never thought loyalty could be so fragile. Back then, if you'd asked me about marriage, I would have told you it was built on shared memories, trust, and the quiet understanding that you and your partner were two halves of a whole. That's what I believed my husband and I had. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The truth started to shift one summer evening in our small but warm house in Nashville. It was one of those muggy Tennessee nights when the air feels thick enough to drink, and the cicadas sing until your brain feels wrapped in static. My husband, Mark, had invited a few of his closest friends over for a backyard barbecue. I'd always liked his friends, guys he'd known since high school, the kind of men who still teased each other about old girlfriends and football games from 20 years ago. They felt like family, and for a long time, I thought they saw me as a little sister. That night, the smell of hickory smoke clung to the air, and the laughter was loud enough to spill over the fence into the neighbor's yard. I was in the kitchen putting together potato salad when I felt a presence behind me. It was James, tall, broad-shouldered, with that easy smile that always made people lean in when he talked. He handed me a beer, and our fingers touched for half a second longer than they should have. It was nothing, or at least I told myself it was nothing. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "No problem," he replied, leaning against the counter, his eyes holding mine just a little too long. It was the first of 100 moments that would start to feel like threads tightening around me. Small things at first. A glance across the fire pit. A joke whispered into my ear that made me laugh too hard. A question about my job that showed he'd been listening more closely than I'd realized. And then there was Mike, another of Mark's friends. He was quieter than James, but when he spoke, it was with a kind of sincerity that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I didn't notice it at first, but slowly, his questions became more personal. He'd ask if I was happy. If I ever felt lonely when Mark was working late. It was dangerous territory, but I didn't recognize the danger yet. The first real betrayal didn't happen in a bedroom, it happened in my heart. It was the night I texted James about something that had nothing to do with Mark. It wasn't a "hey, can you tell Mark to grab milk on the way home" kind of text. It was about me. About a problem I was having at work. And when he responded with a long message full of understanding and encouragement, it felt like finding a glass of cold water in the desert. One by one, his friends began to notice the small fractures in my marriage. Mark and I had been drifting for months, little fights about bills, about how much time he spent at work, about how I always felt like I was coming second to his job. The arguments were never explosive, but they were steady, like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor caves in. James started checking in on me more often. Mike offered to help with things around the house when Mark was too busy. And then there was Ryan, the youngest of the group, who had this restless energy about him. He'd drop by to return something to Mark but end up staying an hour to talk to me about music, movies, and the kind of dreams you have when you're still young enough to believe they're possible. It wasn't all at once, it was a web. And I was caught in the center of it. There was the night James and I stayed up talking on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. We talked about childhood, about regrets, about the ways people change when they grow older. He told me things he said he'd never told anyone. And when he touched my hand, just for a moment, my heart beat in a way that scared me. I told myself I was still loyal to my husband because I hadn't crossed the big line. But loyalty isn't just about what you do, it's about where your heart is. And mine was wandering into places it shouldn't have been. The gatherings started to feel different. Every time we were all together, there was this unspoken electricity. I could feel their eyes on me, and sometimes, when Mark was distracted, I'd let myself meet those eyes and hold them a second too long. It was intoxicating, the kind of attention I hadn't felt in years. But intoxicating things are dangerous. When the truth came out, it wasn't because of a single act, it was because of a pattern. Mark saw my phone one night when I'd fallen asleep on the couch. He didn't tell me what he'd read, but I knew. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I woke up. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet, hollow tone that made my stomach drop. "How long?" he asked. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How do you explain that it wasn't one man, or one moment? That it was a slow slide into a place where the lines blurred so much you couldn't see them anymore? It wasn't the shouting that broke me, it was the silence. It was the way he looked at me as if I'd become a stranger overnight. People think infidelity is about bodies colliding in the dark, but sometimes the deepest betrayals happen in the bright light of day, when you give away pieces of yourself that were never yours to give. I wish I could tell you we worked it out, that we found a way back to each other. But the truth is, some things can't be undone. And the worst part? I still think about them sometimes, not because I love them, but because they were there when I needed someone. And needing someone can be the most dangerous thing of all.